Hello, welcome. It's episode 2 of the X-Defiant show presented by Jake and Guzz. It's recap time here, of course, for what has been Ubisoft's newest title. It's launched successfully. It's had absolutely numbers in droves coming to play. Of course, guys, you've been grinding it extensively all hours of the morning. I think you've put in at least over 100 hours already.
Yeah, I've actually taken a little bit of a hiatus recently just so I don't burn myself out. We are only in pre-season, of course, so take it easy. Siege season launched as well, so I have a bit of a shift of attention towards that at the moment. But, of course, at Ubisoft Forward, the reveal trailer for Season 1 came out. And genuinely, not shilling. I think it actually looked really impressive, looked really exciting, packed with some features that people are asking for as well. And so, yeah, keen to break it down a little bit, speculate, and I get excited for it in a few weeks' time. Yeah, I mean, before we kind of get into the nitty gritty, which, I mean, I guess we haven't really seen everything that's going to come with the season, kind of just what they've drip fed us already. But, I mean, I feel like this is just gaming in this current era where games are essentially made and shipped, ready to go, but then there's already content that's essentially in the vault for at least the next 6 to 12 months to keep people interested. You don't just see games get shipped anymore, and then that's it, and then they're left untouched, especially for what is essentially a live service game too, for X-Defiant and free-to-play, right? They're going to have content ready to go. And I actually think what makes this really, really good for Ubisoft's perspective, at least, where they were in a position they could launch the game, there's enough there already, pre-season, etc., that season 1's not that far away, and here's even more content to come. And what that does is it gives them space. It gives them space to develop, and they've got more and more things. So by the time this ends up coming out, then season 2 is not that far behind because they've had extra time to get that underway. And as long as they can stay on a good track, I think that we're going to see probably X-Defiant have, I think, a lot of content, at least over the next 2 to 3 years, get pumped into it. For what is essentially its birth, it needs to have a thriving amount of content constantly pumped into it. It cannot be left for dead. Otherwise, your competition is going to be creeping straight back up onto you in Black Ops and all the Call of Duties, etc. So we'll kind of unpack things a little bit here before we get into maybe some of the other conversational points. But straight away, new faction, which is pretty big. Consider when we spoke about it on the first episode regarding like how many factions are we going to see? How often are these going to essentially get added? Well, 1 every per season, so that's like 4 a year. What does this game look like in 3-4 years? Is it Overwatch? Is it League of Legends? The GSK come in and essentially straight from Rainbow Six Siege. Yeah, so yeah, pretty much a straight rebrand of GSG from Rainbow Six. The characters themselves looking very akin. I don't know if like mechanically they're going to be the same, but Blitz, Bandit, IQ, they look very, very similar. And in addition to the characters, of course, they have new gadgets and a new Ultra. And again, it was only a teaser, so we don't actually know the nitty gritty as to how these particular gadgets are going to operate. In fact, they didn't actually officially reveal what they were, but you could, by piecing together frames of the trailer footage, you could work out what was unveiled. So barbed wire and a trophy system of some sort are the 2 unique gadgets that are going to be available. Again, you can find those both in Rainbow Six, but as is the nature of X-Defiant, I think they'll both certainly have valid use cases in this arena shooter format. And then as an Ultra, the shield from Blitz is going to be in play. Now, I don't know what they're going to call it because there's already a Blitz shield by name already in the game, so I don't know what they're going to call it, but essentially looks like it operates in a similar fashion to Blitz in Rainbow Six. So hopefully, as I've spoken over that, I've given, for those watching with video, screenshots so you guys can actually see what it looks like and what to look out for in the trailer. But yeah, that's essentially the big 3 things that are getting added into the game with that new faction, and I'm sure we can ramble on a little bit about our thoughts on each of them. Yeah, from my understanding, I don't think shields in this kind of genre is exactly like out of place or anything. I think that we've seen ballistic shields, for example, in Call of Duty before too, so it shouldn't really be too out of the norm. That's where it gets into contentious territory already. I've already seen a lot of comments of people not necessarily upset, but maybe a little bit cautious about shields getting added into arena shooters. I know it's been a bit of a hot topic in COD. People see it as a bit of a cheese tool in the game, but I think it's really important to just be mindful that it is an Ultra, and so their impact is going to be limited. It's not everyone running around with shields flashing everybody the entire game. You're not going to have like be versing a 5-man of shields constantly running around with it in hand. Again, but this is where it's very difficult. We're in pure speculation mode at the moment. We don't know how long the ultra is going to last. We don't know how powerful the flash is going to be. We don't know if you can shoot even with the shield up. I don't think that was certain in the trailer either. But you are right. It's not completely out of place for sure.
A couple of new maps, but going to be essentially trickled over, what is that? I guess like one map a month, which I actually kind of like that because, I mean, how else are you really going to do it? You've got essentially 3 maps coming in, right? So Clubhouse from Rainbow Six, which is, I think, really cool. The fact that Ubisoft is kind of creating its own little verse. I think a lot of publishers are kind of starting to do that a little bit in this kind of 2020s, where we're seeing a lot of games from publishers who have got multiple titles start to kind of integrate them. Daytona from The Crew, which again, like when you've got these kind of assets, it's really cool that you're able to use this. And then Rockefeller. So I think, yeah, the understanding is very much 1 map a month, which is good because then it means that you're not getting all of it at once. And it means that, okay, map comes in, you learn it, you play it, you get inundated, something new, something fresh. And it just probably keeps the game fresh over the course of the season. That it's not just like day 1, here's everything, off you go. Now it's like, okay, day 1, the vast majority, and then in a month, here's another map, and then in another month, here's another map. I wouldn't honestly mind seeing them do that with like the guns, for example, too. Just space it out. Not everything has to be on one particular day. It should be like 1 map, 1 gun, you know, every month for 3 months, here's your season. And I think that stretches it out in a really good way.
Yeah, I think the maps overall looked really strong. I'm assuming based on how it was outlaid in the trailer that it will be, you know, Clubhouse, Daytona, Rockefeller in that order. It looks like Clubhouse is, in terms of size and scale, quite similar to the Siege map, but obviously it's been dramatically renovated to make it actually playable.
You gotta open it up a bit.
Like a 3-lane format. Destructibility is not at the core of X Defiant, so you have to change that up. It looked like there was maybe a staircase to the 2nd floor. You can see it in a couple of the shots, but I don't know for sure if you can actually access the 2nd floor. It would be a little bit strange. I'd be surprised. Daytona was difficult to get a read as to what that map shaped up to be, and Rockefeller looked like it was much more of like a smaller, compact, condensed map like Arena. So I think there's enough variety there in Season 1 in terms of maps. I kind of agree that spacing it out per map. I understand some people may say that as, you know, them just lazily drip feeding the content, but I think it's also important, especially as this game continues to grow, that by spacing out content, you actually give it room to breathe and room to balance it properly.
Yep.
Maybe not as applicable for maps as it is for weapons and agents, but that's going to be something going forward. I don't know if you want, did you want to loop back to the conversation on the gadgets a little bit as well? Because I feel like the barbed wire and trophy systems, you know, they're pretty important talking points, right? We talked a lot about in the first episode on objective base modes in particular. It can be quite difficult to defend them. The biggest reason at the moment in my eyes is the nade spam. And so by having some kind of trophy system where you can deny projectiles, I think is going to be really strong and has a really good place in the game. I love that idea. I don't know how it's going to work. Is it going to be a tool that you can throw? Do you have to go into like a placement animation? I don't believe it was shown in the trailer. And so that's where it's going to be interesting. Also, how's it actually going to operate? Is it, you got 1 burn and it's done? Does it refresh? There's so many different variables that they can use to balance it. And then barbed wire. In Siege, we saw they added damage to it recently, actually, in the game where he added it. Is there going to be damage in this? Is it just going to be a slow effect? Again, but I think they're both really strong defensive tools that are going to be, you know, very usable.
I feel like it's almost both of them are designed to kind of maybe slow things down a little bit too within the games themselves. If you think about kind of what the trophy system and the barbed wire is essentially trying to do, is it can offer a player who maybe the pacing doesn't quite suit them. So it's like, okay, well, I'll bring these gadgets to manipulate the pacing of the game around me. You know, if I'm having trouble with nade spams, bring the trophy system. If people are like just rushing me, then you got barbed wire. But I think it'll also be kind of like mode dependent in terms of like where they're going to be best used.
Oh, for sure. I mean, in like a hot shot or a TDM mode, which we'll get into in a second, they're probably not going to be all that good. But you think about an Occupy, even Dom, like trying to hold down a B side on Dom, like it's going to be really powerful tools. And I think it does introduce a different play style where it is more viable to actually bunker down on an objective. Now at high levels of play, a lot of it is about you know zoning opponents and playing flanks, whereas now it may be actually a little bit more viable to hold the objective itself. And again, you think about, it's not even just the interaction of the barbed wire / trophy system itself on the site, but it's how you can then combine that with other agents like the barrier, for instance, and You know, you throw a healer into the mix, Libertate into the mix. So again, I think they're both going to be good additions. And yeah, keen to see how they actually operate and balance, but we'll get more insight on that at a later date, I believe.
Yep. And I also like the fact that it's like, at least from the design perspective, the thinking is not always just going to be about like the pacing in terms of fast, or we want like, you know, super fun. Everything has to be super amazing. 2 defensive gadgets that maybe slow things down, that give you a little bit more personal play, I think is a good thing. So I think that, yeah, I'd give it a tick at least right now, but as you said, we kind of have to see how it does play out, and I think it will very much be like mode and maybe even map dependent as well. A couple of new guns coming our way. Now, I don't even know how to butcher this name, but the LVOAC AR, I feel like I've just said like 6 letters and not really a gun, along with the L115 sniper and the sawed-off shotgun. Talk about 3, I guess, vastly different kind of guns making their way in. And we'll kind of touch on potentially sniper stuff later on, but at least there's variety in the new guns that are getting added. So I mean, realistically, if you want the more close-up running gun, shotgun could be your play. Sniper is a sniper. I don't know. Actually, did they show too much about how it's going to differentiate in terms of these guns compared to like already what's in the game? Because that's the thing with arena shooters for me, and like my days of Call of Duty, it was always kind of like there was like one gun everyone used, or maybe 2 at a stretch, and there would always be this arsenal of weaponry. Like there'd always be good options to choose from. And you know, if you're doing like back in the day, the old prestige races, for example, and I'd be you know, going from 1 to 55 or whatever, and that's about the only time I would ever actually use more than like 1 or 2 guns. How are these guns in this game going to differentiate? That's the question for me.
Yeah, again, we need to wait and see more. I think, you know, in terms of the LVOAC, however you want to say it, the assault rifle, I think ARs at the moment are actually in an okay spot. I think most would agree that there's at least 2 front runners in the ACR and the AK that are quite viable. In fact, I've even seen tournaments where the AK is actually outlawed. You can't use it. And even there's some like M4 love at the moment, and also the M16 burst gun as well can be viable. So it'd be interesting to see how it slots in. I don't think we're at a point, and I don't think we ever will be with X Defiant, where it's like COD, where it's, you know, the game's out for a year, you have that 1 or 2 on meta guns, you know, that 1 AR, that 1 SMG. I'm thinking back to like the Black Ops 2 days, which you probably are, a similar timeline where the game really didn't get balanced post-launch either, so you were kind of just stuck with it. X Defiant is not going to be like that. I would not be shocked if guns continue to move up and down in terms of power rankings as we continue to evolve and as they continue to, you know, collect data, collect feedback. So this assault rifle, you know, again, could be terrible, might not be great, could also be the best gun in the game. We don't quite know. We didn't see enough gameplay from the sniper either, really, to know how that's going to slot in terms of where it's going to, because at the moment we have, you know, 2 very distinct snipers, one that's harder hitting but less mobile, one that's more mobile but you have to basically hit upper body or headshots. So maybe it could be some kind of middle ground. As for the sawed-off shotgun, I don't know, I don't really see that as being much more than a meme weapon, where, you know, get up close and personal.
One thing actually, and I can't believe I'm referencing Valorant, but when they brought in their new sniper, I was very curious to see how that was going to play out. You know, the kind of like double shot sniper that they brought in, where you get like essentially 2 in the chamber, and you can kind of go and somewhat use it like a regular sniper if you want to take 1 shot, take a bit of time, take the 2nd shot, or you can get it in a double shot. I think that's a really good way of differentiating. And like you said, kind of trying to find a middle ground. Like, and that's the thing. At the end of the day, it has to differentiate. Snipers are snipers. You can only do so much with them. And like you said, you got like a mobile one, and then you got one where you're a little bit more hard stuck. So curious to see, I guess, how all of those guns are going to play out. And not just those guns in particular, but just guns in general. Like, with arena shooters, it's always one of the more tricky points. And then it goes back to kind of the same conversation regarding factions for me. Like, where does this eventually slow down? Like, where do you get to a point where it's like, well, you can only add in so many guns throughout this game's lifespan. Otherwise, in 3-4 years' time, because again, this is not like Call of Duty. Like, you're not going to end up in a position where it's just like, okay, well, after a year, it doesn't really matter because we're just going to be making a whole new game. And we can make the AK 12 times in 12 years because that's just how it works. Like, we just re-release the games, essentially. X Defiant is not following that approach. X Defiant needs to be very, very careful with how they're introducing guns, because 3 new weapons for 1 season, can you sustain that? I don't think so. Otherwise, in 4 years, I'm going to boot up the game and it's going to be like 120 ARs.
Yeah.
So
again, as we probably will frequently do throughout the show, is reference Rainbow Six because it's the best example of arguably a live service shooter in general, but certainly from a Ubisoft perspective, it did reach a point. Now, how much of it was the game health suffering and how much was it a lack of content, perhaps a mixture of both, where things started to slow down? We got, less characters, less operators. We started to see less and less guns introduced, less and less maps. Then we went through a phase of more reworking previous content. So I wouldn't be surprised if XDefiant reached it. If it continues to do well, it will reach a point where that's going to be inevitable, where content will slow down and there'll be reworks, etc.
When I started playing League of Legends, they were releasing champions every week. It was like, I shit you not, once a week or once every 2 weeks. Like that was their
That's a joke.
That was their release pattern, which is insane. Like there used to be like the weekly spotlight where they bring out a new champion. Like it was insane. And eventually that has to slow down as well, right? So I think for XDefiant, it's just a matter of, okay, like I understand the first year especially is going to be this like pump year of like get content out, but then you've got to have that backup plan. What is that going to look like? And it also means that people are going to get used to this. People need to be kind of aware that this is not something that's going to be sustainable. In 1 to 2 years time, you can't keep doing this.
We're in year 9. We're approaching year 10 of Rainbow Six, and every single time a roadmap is released, people will still complain that we don't get 2 operators in the map every single season like we did in year 4.
Yeah.
It's going to happen with XDefiant at some point. But honestly, if we reach that point, it's because the game's done well. So
do you remember when they used to have 3 maps like a season? It was 3 maps a season. Now we get 1 map a season, and then
it will happen. It will 100% happen.
But the game has to also do it right now. And I think, I understand pumping out the content right now is very, very important because it's kind of like sending your child off into the world. You got to you got to make sure they're prepared. If they're not prepared, they're not coming back. But I think for XDefiant, they're so far going about in the right approach. And for people, it's just about understanding, okay, this is not going to be like a long-term thing. New modes coming in as well, actually kind of following into the same conversation with Capture the Flag and TDM making their way in. And again, it's where people have to be grounded. Like these are not additions that anyone should be surprised about. They're very much staples when it comes to arena shooters or any kind of shooting game, to be completely honest, just about. So good additions, not surprised. It was always going to be a matter of when, not if. But it's not like every single season expect 2 modes, right? Like that just is not going to be the case. So, good additions, and it's great because it makes season 1 look really good. And so far, like, if you kind of break down season 1 with what you're getting, 3 maps, 3 guns, 2 new modes, new gadgets, new faction, that is a hefty amount of shit. Like that is a lot of shit. That is an insane amount of content for a free-to-play game coming out in season 1. I mean, that is really, really solid that you're not going to get that same amount. Like even this time next year for a season, you're not going to get that same amount of content. So enjoy it, enjoy these modes. And I think, Capture the Flag, TDM especially, probably even more than Capture the Flag, just has to be a staple. I'm actually surprised they didn't launch with TDM. That's interesting.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that was to try and shape player behavior to be more objective oriented. Maybe that's like way too big brain and I'm overthinking it. But I know from my perspective, I kind of hate when a COD game gets like 2 years into the life cycle and the only thing you can find is TDM. I just much prefer objective-based modes. It's good to have. I'm sure there's plenty of people that hate objective modes and just want to run and gun, and you'll have that option now outside of Hotshot. CTF, a great addition, and again coincides as well with ranked being added and announced for season 1. So that's going to be a great competitive mode. Really classic 3-lane map design for 2-flag CTF. I think it's going to be great. I think XDefiant is going to be a really good, sandbox for a CTF experience. I'm not really someone that loves CTF or has played a ton of it in any game really in the past.
CTF is like a late 90s, early 2000s game mode, isn't it?
It's like very Halo vibe to me.
Halo,
like that's probably the game I've played it the most in.
I don't know. I don't think Quake had that, but like similar kind of. Maybe it did. I don't know. Yeah, no, Quake definitely would have had CTF, surely. Either way, like, that is always a mode that I'll get reminded of. I'd love to see it like Kill Confirmed or like XDefiant.
Well, they have Hot Shots, so it's kind of their version already.
Well, that's probably what I was going to go in, is like finding ways to like make their own modes. I guess, or even
I
even in not just kind of ripping off something like Kill Confirm, but like maybe just breaking the the norm, complete new mode somehow from the ground up, something that like a Call of Duty doesn't have, for example. That's got to be the things that maybe not right this second, because I think getting in CTF and TDM etc is probably the right play. But in future, that's what they're going to have to do. Like season 1 next year, it's like this whole new mode. It's awesome. You do this, yada, yada, yada. That's what's going to get people, you know, re-engaged, for example. Well, speaking of Black Ops and Call of Duty, considering, again, I think, despite the fact it's the X to Fight show, and somewhat similar to Rainbow Six on the Siege show, where we, you know, constantly will reference competition in terms of like Counter-Strike, for example, or Valorant. The same will be done here as well. Black Ops is, and Call of Duty in general, is going to be always the main competitor when it comes to X Defiant. And just very recently, Black Ops 6, a little bit of a reveal in terms of what they're cooking up, coming out in October. And the biggest takeaway for me, I mean, I didn't like fully immerse myself into like the reveal. I'm sure you probably did, but it was kind of the movement. The change up in terms of what they're doing regarding movement, which I think is probably something that the genre needs in general, in terms of when you're rehashing the same thing over and over and over again, it's about time you kind of change things up in the right direction. I'm not talking about like adding booster packs and flying around like, what was it? Advanced Warfare or whatever. But I think what they've done with the movement is very interesting. I'm very curious to see how it plays out from the footage I saw. It looks smooth. Like it looks like it will be good, but it's hard to know until you get your hands on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was actually quite impressed at the Black Ops 6 reveal. I will add the caveat, though, that I think overall it's probably overrated. But even X Defiant, I have a bone to pick with this a little bit as well, is a lot of the, you know, the core features and shit like that, it's just stuff that people have been begging for them to bring back, right? Like prestiging, like...
Oh, yeah, don't get me started on that.
Round-based zombies, like... All this shit is stuff that probably never should have been removed in the first place. And now they give it back and everyone's like kissing their feet. Yeah. It's like, well, it never should have been removed in the first place. Really should have.
That's classic gaming, isn't it, in general, right? Where a company will remove content and then bring it back 5-6 years later and everyone's like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can't believe they've done this. Why the fuck did you remove it in the first place?
And then you give it like another 5 years time and they'll probably... go in the same saga where the game, like we did with Call of Duty for a little bit there, where it's like the game's stale, change shit, and then they change it.
It's like
it goes on
completely off. But like World of Warcraft used to have tier sets, and everyone used to love tier sets, and then they removed it, and then like a couple of years later, they were like, "Oh, we're bringing tier sets back," and everyone's like, "Oh my God, this is amazing, so good!" And it's just stop rewarding developers and publishers who take shit away and then bring it back and act as if it's like this like
Stockholm syndrome,
this new system that they've just reintroduced or whatever, and it's just like, You know, I will say in terms of the prestige system that they've brought back, at least they've added onto it. So if you watch the trailer, they kind of add that there's like, what, the prestige master or something. So
it's like 1,000 levels.
Yeah, you get your first 10 levels, which is essentially like the old prestige system. And then after that, there's even more, which I find insane because if the numbers and how long it actually takes to hit prestige 10 is like still the same, that is a fuckload of time. I don't know how anyone's getting like beyond 10.
There'll be 3 more CODs that are out.
I think there's going to be a lot of people who have grown up with COD who are like, oh, I'm going to come back. I'm going to hit prestige 10. Like you're not 16 anymore, mate. You don't have thousands of hours. There is that. I could barely hit like prestige 5 back in the day, let alone get to 10. I don't know. And I was young and I had free time. So I don't know what people are expecting. So I'll be very curious to see if like the XP rate's going to be the same. But one thing, you would have probably been a little bit too young, but I remember back in the day they used to have like the prestige races were like streamed. Like it's not like
really,
I
don't remember that.
It's not like esports, I guess, in a sense, because it was like a lot of content creators back in the day. A lot of the Call of Duty content creators kind of like all came together. Well, Machinima, that's what the company was called. And it was like early days of YouTube. And they would do like a 24/7, and it would be one account, and they'd just get a bunch of content creators in, and they'd all take turns like shift work essentially.
Yeah, that does sound kind of familiar.
To get the account to max prestige, and it might take. I can't remember how long it took them. It was like a 2-week thing. Like it was a 2-week thing, like constant playing nonstop, and it was really cool. Like because you could just tune it in any time. It was always going to be on. It was a fun little thing, and I'll be very curious to see if that happens. I imagine there'll be like a lot of Twitch streamers and stuff who are like, you know, racing to prestige 10, you know, and I think that's content in itself, and that's something that's going to be really, really big for Black Ops. So At the end of the day, though, the competition is good. I think a healthy Black Ops and a healthy Call of Duty is going to be healthy for XDefiant and vice versa. I think it's very evident if you're anyone who knows anything about like publishing and game development that, you know, XDefiant's been around for a while, cooking in the corner. like, and Treyarch and Activision are very much aware of the fact that there's a competition on its way, or a competitor on its way. And I think that's why you get kicked into gear, and it's like, okay, well, how do we now make sure that we remain on top? How do we keep our player base? We know that XDefiant's going to launch before Black Ops 6, so we've got to do something to get their attention. And I think, honestly, Black Ops 6's marketing as well has probably been the most intense I've seen from a Call of Duty title in a long time. Like, I'm getting WhatsApp messages like what the fuck is wrong with that? So
I would love to be like a fly on the wall in, you know, Activision / Treyarch management as to how much attention they did pay to XDefiant and how much it actually influenced like the decision making for this game. Because it's not like XDefiant didn't come out of nowhere and Black Ops 6 was cooking in the background. They would have had somewhat similar, I think, development timelines. Like XDefiant has been in private testing for a couple of solid years now. And that's why when like during the Black Ops 6 reveal, and again it goes back to the point of bringing back stuff that never should have left, is that they made such a big point, oh, we're bringing back 3-lane maps. It's like, how much of that was influenced by XDefiant? Like, because it was evident the first 30 seconds you played XD that it had that classic COD arena map design, and it's little features like that that just have me thinking that
it's good though. It's healthy, because if you're a fan of, like, I mean, at the end of the day, we're not shills. If you're a fan of Call of Duty and you're someone that's like it, and maybe over the last 3, 4, 5 years, you've kind of become a little bit disappointed with the product, XDefiant's launch, what it's done, has clearly kicked Call of Duty into gear to get back into the things that maybe you like about it. And therefore, yeah, go off, have fun, play Call of Duty. We said it in the opening episode, guys. Like, this is not a case of I have to pick. Like, both games are quite seasonal.
I plan on playing both. As long as Black Ops 6 doesn't suck ass, I will 100% play both. And Black Ops 6 also has the advantage of Game Pass, which is going to be fucking really intense. Obviously, XD is free, but that's going to be really interesting. So yeah, it's going to be great. The other, very, very briefly, the one thing they didn't mention, and a lot of people pointed it out in the Black Ops 6 reveal, is no mention at all, no talk about skill-based matchmaking. So I can only assume that it's staying the same. Or they're saving it for their multiplayer reveal.
I would say if you're going to talk about that, that's the multiplayer reveal, because the multiplayer reveal.
Imagine they just drop that bomb that they're reworking it or removing it or whatever.
It'd be interesting.
Crazy.
Yeah. Let's not harp on that for too long, because obviously this is the XDefiant show, but it is warranted discussion, because I think, both of them are going to always be kind of in the same pod now, but that's a good pod to be in if you are XD. And we'll go over to Mark Rubin here for the IGN interview that was recently put out. So just a couple of comments, I guess, and some talking points here regarding, say, like the launch reception, which he says, and I quote, "We've been keeping the game low-key, not spending $250 million on crazy trailers. We're a low-key game here for the fun, and the fans building it with the community." You know, it's kind of interesting when I just mentioned the marketing spending for Call of Duty, which I tell you what, probably is in the hundreds of millions at this rate. You know, whether or not that, like, at the end of the day, though, I will say
it's a jab.
It's a jab. It is a jab, but like, if you had $250 million to spend on crazy trailers, you probably would, Mark Rubin. You just don't have that. I'll be honest, you just don't have that money to spend on it, and that's okay. You don't need it.
Not in the position.
You don't, and that's okay. That's okay. But that is very interesting, because I don't know. It's a very interesting comment to actually say that out loud. It's almost like, hey, we've got no money, but that's okay. Like, we're poor, but don't worry about it.
We've made a free game that's a little bare bones, but bear with us.
I will say, though, I like the next comment here, which is about making sure they keep the game thriving, that it's not a sprint, but, you know, we're concerned about winning the marathon. And I like that, because I can't remember who it was that entered the space in one of the game titles, Valorant. You know, Valorant, I think when they were taking on like Counter-Strike, like at no point was Riot ever like, we're here to like win the tax shooter war or anything. We're happy to just be, you know, with CS in the same kind of boat. For Mark Rubin to basically say, we are concerned about winning the marathon, is quite intriguing to me, because it basically says, even if we finish second, and even if we're still in the conversation in 3, 4, 5 years time and we're relevant, but Call of Duty is still, you know, a bit more popular, Okay, that's at least a floor that we can fall to, but we're going to aim to be the best. We're going to aim to be number one. We're going to aim to take that market space and claim it as our own. And that's why, like, right now, if you think about the sprint, they control the space because there's no relevant Call of Duty to play. Like, they control the space right now. That changes, though, come October. That changes then come next year. So what, and that's why they can't just be entirely in this mindset. And I think if you were to look at that, roadmap, you might look at it as like, well, that roadmap is almost designed to win the sprint. But in some ways, like, if you're going to win the marathon, you got to start well anyway. So I'll be very curious to see if he can follow up on those words regarding the longevity, because that's going to be the biggest thing. It's one thing to pump out all this content at the start, and then in 1 or 2 years there's a drought. Well, that's not going to win you a marathon. So if he says that they're planning to win the marathon and the content they're already putting out, it says to me the XDefiant has got a lot kind of cooking in the chamber. And then it kind of just goes on about, like, you know, taking on feedback, collecting data, being transparent, sharing a lot of this data as well. And I think this is one thing that XDefiant and Ubisoft will always have over Call of Duty is the transparency. And having someone who can be that spokesperson, because it's just a different kind of company. And I think that's going to always bode well with a lot of the players and the fans. And so ultimately, Mark Rubin is kind of, you know, the modern day Jeff Kaplan, and we'll see whether or not that continues to be a success.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been very evident from day one. Mark Rubin, especially publicly on Twitter, has been very outspoken. He's spoken very publicly about different elements of the game, you know, helping people fix their problems, etc., etc. I wonder how much of the transparency directive comes from him and how much of it is higher ups from Ubisoft. Because again, going back to Siege, they had a chronic issue for the first about 3-4 years of the game where their communication was shit. It followed like the very classic, even to this day, sort of Call of Duty route of being quite just non-existent, really. Less personable, less transparent. And then there was certainly a shift in communication. Now we have things like in Siege, we have like the designer notes where they show us, you know, different statistics and stuff. And it very much sounds like that's something that Rubin's looking to add into the community roadmap for XD, which is great. Not many games are particularly transparent with how they balance things. And I maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like he mentioned, like, there's like an offhand comment about, like, there's no hidden agendas or anything with XDefiant. Again, that could be another jab at some of the balancing policies of a game like Call of Duty. I'm not too sure. But yeah, I think it's a great plan if they're happy to, you know, give data on different abilities and guns and whatever, and why not something is changing in the game.
Yeah. It's very important.
I don't really see the issue.
It's very important. I'll use like Dead by Daylight as an example where a lot of the times Behavior Interactive, the publishers, will put out their statistics, and the community before the numbers come out, the community is like, oh, this killer's overpowered. And then they literally are like, well, here's the numbers, and they show you the numbers, and they're like, it's actually not that overpowered. And so then it's like, oh, okay. But then they go on and explain that sometimes, and this is more the community, the numbers don't always tell the truth and the full story, at least in that particular game where it might, okay, well, maybe at the low level, that killer's crap, but at the high level, it's really, really good. And so that's where you got to be a little bit careful in trusting the numbers to the T, because sometimes you can have the overall raw data, but do you have, say, like, I don't know, a certain gun is like broken in the right hands, but in the bad hands, like a bad player can't maybe use it as well. I'll use a sniper as an example. Like a certain sniper, let's say this L115 comes out, and if you're, you know, one of the top players, you are absolutely just gunning everyone down with this thing. But like, let's say I pick up a controller and I'm just awful on it. Well, your data is now skewed, and you're gonna have a lot of people who are like, I'm getting destroyed by people who are using this sniper, and then I go and use it and I suck ass and I can't quite get the same effect. How do you balance that then? Because if you nerf it, well, I couldn't already use it before. Now I definitely can't use it. That's where data can be a little bit tricky. So yeah, I mean, be transparent 100%, but don't always just like entirely trust the data. We'll look to wrap things up here. New patch coming out as of recording this episode. From my understanding, and you're our little editor, I think it should actually already be out by the time this episode is out. And with that, I think the biggest one is certainly like the sniper flinching and the penalties when it does come to jumping and crouching. So yeah, I guess a decent little patch, and I think full patch notes will go up apparently tomorrow, as of recording this at least.
I think, yeah, the notes will basically be out as this video is live.
Right.
I don't believe they're going, the notes themselves are going live with the actual update, but they noted in the tweet that sniper flinch, jump, crouch penalties are at the forefront. There hopefully might be some adjustments to things like netcode, and there's a couple of bugs in the game and stuff as well that need smoothing out. So
right.
Hopefully, but again, sounds like a positive step in the right direction. I do wonder what the longer term vision is going to be regarding patches. Are we going to see, like one significant balance / bug patch per season? Is it just going to be whenever they feel it's necessary? Like, I wonder what that roadmap is going to look like going forward. Again, we're only in preseason, so I'm not reading too much into it at the moment. I feel like, a couple of weeks in, these changes are probably the most pressing, and provided they're implemented well, it's a positive.
I'm going to close on this as we look to wrap up our second episode. And it's certainly going to be a discussion point over the next couple of months regarding these two games, especially over the next year, Black Ops 6 and XDefiant and Call of Duty and stuff moving forward. Is the world in which both of these games are able to coexist simply going to come down? And this is probably a simple way to look at it. Call of Duty game comes out, everyone flocks to it, everyone buys it, everyone plays it. A couple of months later, everyone goes back to XDefiant. And if so, who wins that battle then, if that ends up being the case? And the reason why I put it like that is simply because XDefiant is free to play. So it's always going to be there. And Call of Duty is, at least to me, that kind of game that everyone, like, the launch is hype, everyone plays it. The first 1 to 2 months is massive. The casuals are there, and then they will kind of like go back to their thing. Do you see it kind of playing out that way? And if you do, who ends up being the winner? If not, is it a draw? How do you kind of view it? How do you think they're going to coexist?
I guess it really depends on how you're quantifying a win. I suppose for Call of Duty, getting people's hands on Game Pass and buying the game is fine. Obviously, longevity is great for more sustained cash flow through the in-game store. But if you're getting people paying to come through the door, then it's probably okay. Whereas XDefiant, its business model is much more reliant on player retention. So you are relying on people coming back and staying and spending. And so I think that's why they can coexist. If XDefiant was a yearly or a bi-yearly, full investment, I'd be very hard pressed, especially in the state that it's in, to see it survive, past a couple of launches. Whereas I think that this lines them up well. The most intriguing thing for me for this battle is going to be those release schedules. Is there going to be a conscious cat and mouse between the two in trying to outdo the other and when seasons get released, like, the Black Ops 6 seasons, for instance, or are they just going to kind of stick to their guns? I don't quite know. I'm trying to sort of do the math on when Season 2 for XD releases. I think it's going to be in such a way that there's like a couple of weeks window for that season, and then Black Ops 6 comes out. And for like XDefiant, I think that's perfect. That if they have the advantage of a couple of weeks to get people to play before Black Ops 6 or the Black Ops 6 seasons, then
like imagine
surely that's better.
I would almost like want to bring out Season 2 a month before Black Ops 6, and then
I think it's like 2 to 3 weeks, but I can't remember.
And then Season 3 should realistically look to come out like 3-4 months after Black Ops 6. Which I think you almost want to give the opposition its space and say, we're not going to try and like trample on that. We'll take the market share beforehand, and we'll take the market share afterhand. And that's the way that I would kind of, look to view it. But I mean, I tell you what, if you play both games, you're absolutely living rent free in both the publishers, because like you get new content,
exactly.
Then you get new content, and then guess what? You get new content. So if that's, if this is your kind of games, you're absolutely like 2024 onwards is the best time to be a fan of arena shooters. We're going to leave it there for the second episode of the XDefiant show. New patch. Hopefully everyone enjoys. Of course, more content to come though as we get closer to the Season 1 launch. We'll see you soon.